We're having to decide in all these cities that are resurging, we're having to decide who to trust with our lives. How do we make decisions? And nobody knows who to even ask, let alone who to trust. That's a failure of leadership. And it's not just about testing, but if you want to go there, what about tracking and tracing? Here we are having these increases in tests, and there's no support from the federal government, which should be a unified position on how to track and trace. There's no support there at all. Every city and state is left to their own devices, which makes it much more difficult to track and trace because all the data is siloed. And so, again, this comes down to a lack of leadership.
Now, that was Mark Cuban this weekend saying that President Trump and the federal government have not done enough to stop the spread of the coronavirus, calling it a lack of leadership. But with $100 billion in bailouts to the states and emergency hospitals built to handle the outbreak, is that really the case? Florida Senator Rick Scott joining me now to discuss. Senator, good to see you. Donald Trump isn't doing much of anything to help the states. That's what we hear from Mark Cuban. That's what Joe Biden is now saying. Governor Cuomo is saying that, also pointing his finger at you despite having a far worse record on the coronavirus than you do. What do you say to all them?
Well, first off, let's go to the facts. The facts are that Congress and the president has signed bills to spend $2.9 trillion, over $500 billion to state and local. We gave them $150 billion to deal with coronavirus issues. We gave them $11 billion to deal with testing. We gave them $50 billion to deal with Medicaid, and the Medicaid costs are probably down. $30 billion to deal with their schools. School costs have probably been down. And we've given them almost half of their entire annual revenues to the states. I mean, and we gave another $500 billion if they want to borrow money. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is county health departments are generally either funded locally or at the state. In Florida, we funded them primarily at the state level. So the federal government doesn't run these things, but has the federal government funded it? Yeah. We allocated $175 billion for health care. So, what this is that you have a whole bunch of people who do not want to take responsibility. What you need to do if you're a mayor or governor is step up, inform your citizens of what they need to do, and keep giving them information. No different than what I did when I had a hurricane. The federal government didn't come and bail me out. I didn't expect them to do everything.
Right.
The counties did it, the cities did it, and the state did it.
And that's the idea of a republic. Each state has enormous autonomy to do it the way they think it should be done because they know more about their own surroundings than the people inside the Beltway do. But, there's another thing, which Governor Cuomo is doing, and it's pretty unseemly. After all the trouble he's had in the state of New York, he's pointing fingers at you, at Floridians, and he's also pointing a finger at Texans, suggesting that they've done a terrible job in opening or reopening their economy. And of course, everybody knew that there would be these moments of fires that would spread in different pockets of states that opened up, and that's exactly what we knew would happen, and it's happening, and it's a terrible thing, but we're dealing with it when it happens. Look at the mortality rates, though, of states like Governor Cuomo's that have kept a lockdown tight from the moment it happened in mid-March. New York has a mortality rate, that is those people who've contracted COVID who've died as a result of it, of 7.5%, New Jersey 7.5%, Michigan 8.7%. All those are lockdown states. The more open states like yours and Georgia and Arizona have much less mortality rates. Georgia has a 3.4% rate, Florida 2.6%, Arizona 2.4%. And they're pointing their finger at you when you, in fact, have a mortality rate that's far better than theirs.
I got elected as governor back in 2010 with Cuomo. And what I watched in my 8 years as governor before I was a U.S. Senator is he never takes responsibility. He never makes tough choices. He never could balance a budget. He wouldn't cut taxes. And so whether you're talking about his budget or his response to the coronavirus, he takes no responsibility for his failures. And that's what he's done. So he's always going to try to blame it on somebody else. But it's just shocking that a guy that cannot succeed at anything wants to blame somebody else.
Senator, I want to switch quickly. It's got to be the last point to another issue that we're dealing with, which is these protests that have, in many cases, become riots and the policing problems we're having. Senator Tim Scott, another Senator Scott, Your Republican counterpart in the Senate, senator from South Carolina, came out with a police bill. It may have had some flaws in it. I'm sure every bill does, but that's why you try to work things out. And instead, some Democrats have hurled racial insults at Senator Scott, which I've never seen such a low form of insults as a racial insult, which Senator Durbin threw at him, suggesting that the bill was, quote, a token bill, an obvious racial remark concerning his particular political preference. What do you make of that, where racial insults from Democrats to Republicans are considered fair game?
Well, what Durbin said is disgusting. And, you know, it was wrong what he said. But look, these are the Democrats. Whether it's law enforcement reform or taking care of our DACA kids or balancing our budget, they are all talk. They're no action. They will never do anything. All they're worried about is the election in November. Can they use this as a talking point? So there's a lot of problems we have. I've been up here in D.C. for 18 months. What I've watched the Democrats obstruct, do nothing, obstruct, blame, do nothing. That's all they do.
Well, I've actually never seen a racial insult as bare-boned as that in my professional career, and I just think it was absolutely disgusting, and there has not been, as far as I know, a full apology for that from Senator Durbin.
Of course not. They don't apologize. Tim Scott is a caring individual that worked his tail off to come up with a bill that would do the right things. Yeah. Hold people accountable, but make sure we continue to have law enforcement that we support, which we should.
Senator Scott, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.